Well, hi, I'm John Hart, and welcome back to Mr. America Hart. Yes, today I'm talking to you about, will HIIT cause injuries? The HIIT I'm talking about is high-intensity training, high-intensity weight training specifically. Now, here is the thing. High-intensity training was designed, by name, I should say. Back in the 70s, the name popped up quite a bit. High-intensity training. The difference, as we can define it, between high-intensity training and the standard training of the time was that the amount of volume being used by the majority of the people at the time was much greater than those who used high-intensity training. High-intensity training from the 70s all the way to today just simply involves an extreme amount of effort in a short amount of time. The big analogy that's been used over and over again, I've done it in many of my videos, is sprinting versus long distance running. And high intensity training time and again has been shown to stand the test of time or stand up to a higher volume of training in various studies as far as just bringing somewhat similar results, in some cases better, in some cases not better, depending on the variables of the study. Okay, so hope you're all still with me. Now, what exactly, though, is high-intensity training? Well, now this is highly left up to the individual. High-intensity training, we need to get a general idea of what we're talking about. I just used the terminology a moment ago, which was an extreme effort. What would be considered an extreme effort? Possibly one of the highest that I can think of over the last 50 or 60, maybe even 75 years, has been breathing squats, 20 rep breathing squats. That is of an extreme high intensity nature. And what do I mean by that? 20 rep squats wherein pretty much you're done somewhere around number 12, but yet you stand up, take a few breaths, get a few more reps, and take a few more breaths, and then get a rep or two more, and then take a few more breaths and get another rep or two. This is all while the weight is still on your back. So breathing squats have been around for almost an entire century, spoken of as one of the biggest reasons why bodybuilders of the time, way back, would be able to put on a decent amount of muscle mass. It wasn't a drug, it was that breathing squats. High intensity in nature, for sure. And if you disagree, of course, let me know after you go ahead and you try such a thing. And let me know how it turns out for you and whether or not you can walk for the next week or two after you've done and made such an effort. Breathing squats for 20 reps. And they used to superset that with pullovers at the time. So that would be considered high intensity training, a form of it. Okay? I'm going to pull up a few books here and it's a little bit warm today, so I'm also going to wipe my forehead. But this book, I'm going to make a few recommendations to you. Number one, High Intensity Training, the new High Intensity Training by Dr. Ellington Darden. This book, you can find it out on Amazon in soft cover or hard cover. And Dr. Darden goes over and brings up several routines, multiple routines and techniques, all of a high intensity nature. And within that realm, he worked for Nautilus back in the day in the 70s, Nautilus training equipment, Nautilus Industries. And in that time period, the intense nature of those workouts brought to light the ability that people had, and it stimulated muscle growth. So this is not a debate on this video whether or not it works. My point is, does it cause injuries? At that point in time, there was no debate. Nobody even talked about, people getting injured using high-intensity training techniques such as the ones that Dr. Ellington Darden brings up in his book. So I'm establishing a pattern here. So please, take a look at that book if you get the chance. I'm going to bring up another one right here. This one's been around for a long time. Super squats. Randy Strossen, PhD. Powerlifting circles. Randy Strossen, Iron Mind, Randy Strossen. Super squats. Of course, the book focuses on our favorite exercise, squats, and how you can use it in routines, and specifically, those would be, breathing squats, parallel breathing squats, 20 rep squats, and how you can incorporate it into certain routines. And the base routine that he mentions in here, without using the words super high intensity or high intensity, is an 8 or a 10 exercise routine, and it's performed 3 times a week. And the core of that workout is the squat. The focus of the workout is the squat. So again, high intensity training. After he mentions the regular routine in the book, he has what's called the abbreviated program, and it goes into the next page. The abbreviated program is just 4 basic exercises: bench press, parallel squat, Raider chest pull, bent over rowing, all for 1 or 2 sets. The squats are just 1 set of 20, which again is a very intense breathing set of 20. And there's a diet involved in here that helps to pack on the mass. But again, during the time that this book was published and during the time when Super Squats was established, this is going back to 1971 right here, but this book has been around for decades and used in circles for hard gainers for years and years as a means of gaining weight. So again, no disputing. It worked. People lived by it, gained a lot of muscle on it. On the cover of that book, it says how to gain, look at this, how to gain 30 pounds of muscle in 6 weeks. Now, I'm not so sure, if we're talking about natural, if that 30 pound gain is going to end up being lean body mass, but a decent amount of fat too. But I'm sure they did put on muscle with it as well. Very hard routine. Another book, Brawn, Stuart McRobert, a hard gainer from back in the day. This book right here, another one describes, and this one's published, let's see, back in, this is the first edition was 1991. So we're getting into the 90s now. So Stuart McRobert published Brawn, and in Brawn we have several hard training routines. That one I just described to you from Randy Strossen involved a workout 3 times a week, and then abbreviated routine twice a week for the harder gainers. This one right here, again, we're back to a 2-time-a-week program. Well, back in the day, 2 times a week was not the standard, go to the gym every single day. And these are some basic exercises, again, based on a 20-rep squat program. Very high intensity. So making an effort on a squat for 20 reps and then doing anything else, good luck with that, okay? It's very intense. And he talks about working out twice a week, regular hard training twice a week, along with, again, addressing a diet. So look for this book, Brawn. Again, no disputing. Going into the 90s, we're talking about 3 books I just pulled up with 3 very popular forms of high-intensity training. The other one, of course, being, I always mention in my videos, Dorian Yates, with his blood and guts training. Dorian Yates, he is probably the poster child I know in internet land. Just giving myself a little bit of a whoo. It's a hot one today, so I'm making this video and I'm not minding wiping the sweat off because it's a real hot day, but I want to get this information across to you. Dorian Yates is definitely the poster child for getting injured. He did use high-intensity training. However, out of all of the options I just showed you, Dorian was probably the most ballistic. He, at times, seemed to be throwing some of the weights. If you look at his Blood and Guts videos, some of those are very intense and fun to watch. The problem is that he used a very high ballistic movement in a lot of the movements, and on top of that, when you throw into the mix a high anabolic mix, a very strong diet, okay, pre-contest. He injured himself mostly pre-contest, and he admits it in all of his writings. He says if he could do it over again, he would have not trained so hard right before a contest. So that's the only exception thus far of somebody who was injured, and I say the poster child. And because he was one of the most popular people, besides Mike Mentzer, you know, back in the 70s, 80s, 90s, Mike Mentzer was very popular, wildly popular with heavy-duty training. But again, Mike wasn't walking around with torn muscles. He wasn't tearing people's muscles up either. So we're talking about only one example, which I've seen in the comments section in a lot of my videos, that because Dorian got injured, high-intensity training therefore is dangerous and will cause injuries. But let's just break it down here, guys. That's just not the case. I just brought up 3 great examples of routines and bodybuilders who have followed those routines for decades that never complained that this high-intensity training technique, these high-intensity training techniques, these high-intensity training routines, I consider them all high-intensity training in my world, all of those did not injure people. Dr. Ellington Darden was not tearing people's muscles up left and right. He was not. He was training people down in DeLand, Florida with Arthur Jones, training the likes of Casey Viator, training Sergio Oliva, training Mike Mentzer, Ray Mentzer, Boyer Co. They did not tear muscles training in a high-intensity fashion. So it was only one example over the course of the last 50 to 60 or 70 years that we can think of who did have multiple injuries and explained them as such being pre-contest injuries, Dorian Yates. So let's just get it straight at this point. If you haven't tried high-intensity training, I highly recommend it because your standard conventional training may have brought you some results up to a certain point, but really high-intensity effort and then properly knowing how to adjust the volume, the frequency of those workouts. The more you give within a set, the more effort you make, you have to bring a corresponding reduction somewhere in that routine. I discuss these things in my books, by the way, and I'll also put a link down below for those in Physique 101, Mr. America Shape Up series, and Year 1 in the beginning. You can find all those books down below at the link in the video description of this video. So we have a lot of resources I'm throwing out at you that you can take a look at. But in effect, no, high-intensity training does not tear muscles, injure people left and right. It's not the cause of all of these injuries that people do have. And I just defined several forms of those types of routines. Take a look at all the ones you can see that are out there. I know that there are certain groups out there that consider each one of these rather high-intensity forms of training that I brought up as examples to be not high-intensity training, but they're wrong. They are. They involve a very extreme effort in nature and require you to do short bouts of it. There is our definition. Extreme effort, short bout. Not too long, not prolonged effort. So that's it for today. Listen, take a look off to my left. You're going to see this disc pop up next to my head. That is the subscribe button for my channel. Please, why don't you give that a tap, and that way YouTube will let you know when I have new videos pop up. Down below and off to your left, you're going to see a thumbs up button. That thumbs up button, that thing right there, lets YouTube know that you like the video, you like the work that I'm doing. Please, why don't you give that a tap as well. And I will see you next time from my heart to you, John Hart.